Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. My name's Matthew and I post videos every Monday and Friday, so if you love the tingles, then hit that subscribe button because you are in the right place. Now today's video we are going to be looking at the case of Sonia Herok-Stone, whose case was left unsolved for 40 plus years, and it's crazy to think it took that long for justice to be served, but this cold case heated up and we're going to find out why. So let's go back to 1981, where detectives found her body blocking the front entrance doorway, partially naked and blooded, with a pair of pantyhose tightly tied around her neck. The 30-year-old had been strangled to death. It was said she died slowly, said Linz Dorman, who was one of the first detectives from the Monterey County Sheriff's Office that was on the scene in 1981. It was evident, based on what Dorman saw, that the culprit kneeled over her with his face inches away from hers, taking her pantyhose, pulling tighter and tighter and tighter. This was a violent attack, he said. By the next day, Glazebrook was a prime suspect. He was 25 at the time, married, and a tradesman who'd been discharged from the Navy and lived right across the street. Detective Dorman, who'd been canvassing the neighbourhood with his partner the day following the murder in 1981, approached him while he was fixing a boat in his yard. He asked him to remove a mask covering his face. "I'm immediately drawn to his right cheek," said Dorman. "He's got a deep red scratch just under his eye, running down his cheek, his jawbone, and then it slowly fades into his neck. Then there was blood into his neck. There was blood underneath Sonia's left ring fingernail, a strong indication investigators believed that she clawed the killer moments before her death, and that the cut on Glazebrook's face was coincidentally on the same side investigators found material under Sonia's left hand." That doesn't make sense. And the cut on Glazebrook's right face, coincidentally, on the same side, investigators found material under Sonia's left hand. With you. Glazebrook claimed he got the gash while cutting plexiglass, but Dorman noted in his 1981 report there was no sign of blood in the work area, and his stories also kept changing. First he said he was at his father's house at the time of the murder, then claimed he had gone to the hospital to deal with the cut on his face, and stayed overnight. He maintained he didn't know Sonia. He was fidgeting, he was hemming and hawing. "I'm thinking, boy, this guy is really nervous," said Dorman. "I said, oh, this could be our guy." As suspicions mounted, Dorman and his partner devised a plan to bring Glazebrook into the police station for a series of outstanding traffic warrants. He was booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. The key was to get a mugshot of his face with the cut on it. He agreed to do a blood test that ended up matching the blood under Sonia's fingernail. ABO blood tests were helpful but not conclusive and could only eliminate roughly 70% of the population. Then, upon further questioning, came a blockbuster admission. Glazebrook now claimed to have been having an affair with Sonia and was at the house the day of the murder, but denied killing her. "I'm convinced that's the killer," said Dorman. In 1982, Glazebrook was charged with first-degree murder. Bob Moody, a deputy district attorney who was the lead prosecutor in the trial, said he felt good with the case they had. He had said earlier that he'd never been in her house. Now he puts himself there, said Moody. That's huge. That's the ball game. But just as quickly as they narrowed their sights on Glazebrook, the case began to unravel. Prior to the trial, a judge ruled Glazebrook's admission that he was at Sonia's place the day of the murder was admissible due to police misconduct. The Monterey County Sheriff's Office had violated his rights, having picked him up on traffic warrants instead of murder charges. They lost Glazebrook's statement. It's like I'm going into a heavyweight fight with one hand behind my back, said Moody. This is really blockbuster evidence. Despite this setback, Moody and his team went into the 1983 trial with an ace up their sleeve. A star witness, a woman Glazebrook had been having an affair with, came forward alleging that he had confessed he had been at Sonia's place the day of the murder. It's an independent verification that he was in fact in Sonia Stone's home the morning she was killed. But shockingly, she recanted her story. Glazebrook's girlfriend, according to Moody, told the court that police had been leaning on her and that she made up the story because she was mad at him. This is really bad, said Moody. This is a major blow to the case. To make matters worse, the day they brought in Glazebrook to get a mugshot with the cut on his face, the camera failed to operate. They had no photo of Glazebrook with the gash. The trial ended with hung jury, with nine jurors voting to acquit. Glazebrook was now a free man. By 2009, Dorman had retired, but a new detective from the Monterey County District Attorney's Office was assigned to the case. An investigator had a tool leading in the 1980s. DNA testing. In 2010, John Shanad, a forensics expert and criminalist at the California Department of Justice, started doing tests on evidence, including the blood from Sonia's fingernails. The sample had the profile of male DNA. The goal was then to cross-reference that DNA with a sample of Glazebrook's DNA, which had been stored in blood files roughly 30 years ago. But at some point over the years, those files broke and had spilled on the same envelope where Sonia's fingernails had been kept. Oh no! Setting aside the possible contamination of Sonia's nail clippings with the broken files, the DNA from the envelope covered in Glazebrook's blood had been so severely degraded. Shahad, I think that's how you say it. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Could only generate a faint male profile from it. All the DNA kind of degraded to a point where it wasn't useful, he said. Ultimately, the test did not show that there was male DNA in both samples. I'm thinking it could be Glazebrook, but I don't know for sure. In order to get more certainty, they needed a new DNA sample from Glazebrook, but the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, lacking funding and resources, aren't able to procure another DNA sample from Glazebrook, and the case was once again shelved in 2013. In 2020, the Monterey County District Attorney created a task force focusing on dozens of cold cases where DNA evidence was available. Detective Wilson was assigned to Sonia Stone's case and believed right away it was still very solvable. But tackling a nearly 40-year-old unsolved murder had its unique challenges, from tracking down witnesses who had moved or since passed away to locating evidence stored away and forgotten about. It wasn't going to be easy. It was also critical to figure out whose DNA was under Sonia's fingernail. That meant going back to Glazebrook to get a new DNA sample. By this time, Glazebrook was in his 60s and from the outside looked like an upstanding member of the community. He was a Little League umpire, coach and school bus driver. A search warrant was issued for a DNA sample from Glazebrook in early 2021. After swabbing his mouth in Wilson's vehicle, the sample was sent for testing. It determined that the blood under Sonia's fingernail was Michael Glazebrook, with the odds of it being anybody else other than Michael's was 1 in 46 quadrillion, said Wilson. A quadrillion is 1 million billion. Investigators had a breakthrough. In August 2021, Glazebrook was for the second time charged with first-degree murder in the killing of Sonia Herok-Stone. Knowing the potential weaknesses in their case due to the possible blood contamination, it was later determined there was no contamination. Wilson spent months painstakingly trying to produce an additional DNA sample from a series of breast swabs in Sonia's 1981 sexual assault kit. Upon further testing, the DNA profile generated from those breast swabs were consistent with Glazebrook's. They now had 2 samples of Glazebrook's DNA from Sonia's body. It really cracked the case, said Wilson, and it was the last thing that we needed to be able to prove to a jury beyond any reasonable doubt that Michael Glazebrook was the killer. In the past June, 67-year-old Glazebrook was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Decades after the murder, there was no confession, no apparent remorse, and even as Glazebrook sat in Detective Wilson's car providing that fateful sample of his DNA in 2021, he still couldn't keep his story straight. So did you even know her at all? Asked Wilson, knowing he told the police in the 80s he'd been having an affair. No, he said. Never even met her. This guy is... do we know this was the only murder that he committed? Was it just Sonia? Was there anyone else? This guy, like it said in the article, no remorse. And yet he was living a normal life. Just living his life for like 40 years. He's 67. Life in prison, no chance of parole. He's lived most of his life. He's coming to the end of his life now, let's face it. He's lived his best years. So, yes, it's great that he's been caught. He will spend his life in prison. But at the same time, it's kind of a bit like, was justice done for Sonia? The police did all they could. Science has come a long way since the 80s. DNA testing is more of a thing. But it's an interesting debate whether do you think justice was served or do you not think it was served. the start of this case, I think it kind of, what's the word? They got a bit screwed over, basically, at the start, and I think that was the problem, that, you know, they got off on the wrong foot, and it was clear from the day after the killer was right opposite the street, and it was him. Shh. But the police were, they were screwed over by the technology they had. But let me know if you're still awake, and if you've got any other true crime suggestions that you'd like me to look at, please leave them in the comments below, and let me know in the comments if you think justice was served or not. Obviously, it's not down to the police. The police did all they could, but they, like I said, they got very unlucky from the start. Everything was kind of working against them. So I do feel bad for them, because they knew they had the killer right there, but the killer was left to walk free for 40 plus years with no remorse. Anyway, I'm gonna go because there's a dog barking, and I'm praying to God that you can't hear this video, because I've recorded this video so many times trying to get this right, and it's just not worked. So I hope this is a good, relaxing video to you, and I apologise if it is not. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a big like, subscribe, do all the YouTubey things, and I shall see you in Friday's video. Bye, guys.